All right, here we go. We're going to start today's webinar. I'd like to welcome everyone again. My name is Megan Pagano, and I will be the host for today's webinar. I'd like to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping items before we start the session today. First, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us. We're excited to be hosting this great discussion at Align's corporate headquarters in New York City. Secondly, we will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. Please feel free to submit any and all questions that you may have at any point during this discussion. We'll get to them at the end. All questions that are submitted will be addressed at the end again. Any that we aren't able to get to, we will follow up with you directly on. Below is contact information for the presenters today. Today we have both Brandon Chavon, our Director of Managed Services, and Mark Gelanu. Please feel free to reach out to them at any point in the future or today, and they'll be happy to get in touch with you. A little bit more about the presenters for today's discussion. Mark is responsible for leading the business development efforts and strategic relationships for Align Managed Services. And with over 20 years' experience and success in fast-paced environments, has established Mark as a leader in delivering valuable solutions in unique client environments based on highly customized and specific requirements. Brandon has over 15 years' experience delivering high-demand IT solutions. He began his career by building data centers and networks nationwide and quickly learned from that experience, becoming the Director of IT at a high-speed electronic brokerage firm. He has extensive knowledge of systems integration and support, and here at Align he is Director of our Managed Services Solution. With that said, let's hear what these two have to share with us today.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everybody for joining us today. This is Mark Gelanu. What I'd like to do to start us off today is talk a little bit, very quickly, about Align and who we are, and why we think that we're positioned for this type of topic. Align has been around for a little more than 25 years, and we've been providing complex and complete IT solutions to the Fortune 500 space. Our firm is built into two very distinct practice areas. In the middle of the slide, you can see here the professional services slide, and you can also see the managed services side. Under the professional services side, we have the items project management, systems and networks, data center solutions, and migrations and relocations. This is the design, build, and deploy portion of our firm. On the managed services side, you see service desk, which is what we're going to talk about today, monitoring and operations, hosted computing and IaaS, IMAC and deployments, and scalable IT specialists. This is the managed and enhanced portion of our firm. By offering these two practice areas, we're able to provide our clients with a complete feedback loop for their IT solutions. It's important to note that every one of these teams that you see here under the professional services and the managed services side are individually managed and staffed groups of people. Why that's important is we actually provide true scale. We don't have one or two, three very talented people moving throughout each of these groups. These are, again, individually managed and staffed groups of people. Just below that, you'll see some of the logos of the firms we work with in the Fortune 500 space. What I'd like to point out here is while these are easily recognizable names, it is important to note that we do work all the way down the stack into some of the smaller firms in each of these verticals. To the bottom left, you'll see some of the certifications. This is just a cross-section, an example of some certifications that we have. We have a very aggressive stance on certifications. We continue to maintain them. We continue to chase new certifications, and all of our people are current on their certifications. And then to the bottom right, you see some of the tools that we use. These are some that are purchased. They're best-of-breed tools. They're manufacturer tools. But also some of these names you may not recognize are some homegrown tools that we've designed and created through the years. So let's talk for a second about what we're here to talk about today. This is some of the problems with organically grown service desks, and even to that point, some problems with service desks where you may have selected an outsourced provider already. This touches on the managed services side of our house. It touches on the service desk portion of that offering. These are some quotes that over my career, but even specifically over the last year or two, going out into the marketplace and talking to peers of yours, these are some things that folks have said to us that has really driven our desire to put this webinar together. Now, please note that under each of these quotes, I have attributed it to a person that had mentioned this to me, but it's not isolated to any particular industry or any particular role. The first one, end user support lacks process. It's incredible to me how common this comment is, and perhaps you felt this yourself. This is certainly something that in our mind is easy to rectify, but a lot of times is ignored because it does take time, energy, and effort to do this. And when you're under constant fire, it's very difficult to do that. And leadership is certainly focused in other areas. The next one, I'm not clear on the long-term implications of our tickets. This, to me, is frightening. This can certainly lead to a lot of larger problems down the road. This leads to the constant, big spend every 6 months when something finally pops in your environment, even though the tickets and the incidents have been, reaching out to you over the course of the 6 months leading up to it. Certainly a problem, especially for a firm like that, a global pharmaceutical firm. The next one, we've never measured the efficiency of our staff. A lot of times when I hear this, we do some digging and we realize they simply just don't have the tools to measure the efficiency of the staff. Much like the first point that we talked about, there's just not enough time for them to take the break to look at what they need to really be measuring for their staff. And a lot of times this comes up in Q4 when people are sort of getting ready for the bonus periods. The next one, most of their time is spent on routine calls. Again, very common across the board, certainly what we would expect. I'm not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing, but what it does point out is that indeed across any industry, across any role, most of the level 1 and level 2 stuff is generally the same from service desk to service desk. And you'll hear us talk about 80% of the issues, the 20 most common tickets a couple of times in this presentation. And then the final one, we don't have time to work the way we should. I do hear this often, and it certainly is a residue of some of the ones we've already talked about. But in this particular case, with this particular individual, when we did some digging, we found this to be simply a precursor of much larger issues in that person's environment. And again, these are some of the things that have driven us to want to talk to you today about, can you take some of this chaos, some of these, simple statements that people have made that encapsulate chaos in their world and change that and drive them to a world service platform without spending, a crazy amount of money. So let's talk about, and before we go any further, what does it mean to have a world-class service desk? The first thing we should do is identify what we're talking about, okay? Here we're talking about, from a service desk standpoint, level 1 and level 2 end-user IT support. These are, again, the 80% of the issues that your service desk gets or that your IT team gets. There are 20 very common issues. That's what we're talking about here. Now, that's the level 1. Sometimes things will percolate up to level 2. It might be something a little bit tricky, but at the end of the day, this is what we're really talking about. It can be produced in 3 different flavors. The next bullet point, insourced, outsourced, and partnered. You're going to hear a lot of focus, at least in the next few minutes, on what does that mean and what are the different ways to bring this type of environment, this type of solution into your environment. These are the 3 most common ways to do it. What I like to do is talk to people about, when they're really starting to isolate, is there really pain here? I talk to them about IT and this level 1 and level 2 resource area being the first responders and the face of their IT team. A lot of people lose sight on this. The way that I like to explain this is, if you had a house fire and the first people to show up were paramedics, it probably wouldn't solve your problems. I'm willing to bet that 99% of the time it's not going to solve your problems. You're going to have next possibly a firefighter shows up at your house or a neighbor shows up at your house with a fire extinguisher. Again, doesn't solve your problems, but maybe gives you a little bit of relief, but at the end of the day, it's still prolonging the issue. It's not until the fire engine shows up that can actually put the house fire out do you feel comfort. But the problem at that point is that the damage is already done. Many service desks work in this manner. They don't necessarily have the right tools, they don't have the right personnel, they don't have the right response out of the gate to solve the problems. And what happens is, even though you get to resolution, it might be 2 or 3 hours later, the end user is not happy. The damage is already done. So what then does a world-class service desk look like? And it's painfully obvious, but it needs to be pointed out. A world-class service desk absolutely is process-oriented. It is well documented. You have those 20 most common, end-user issues, down to a science. They become robotic. But then what about the other issues that pop up? Where do people go for a knowledge base on how to solve those problems? 9 times out of 10, we see service desks where everything is being done essentially by the seat of their pants. That's not acceptable. The next one, properly managed end-user expectations. What we see CTOs doing, especially when they insource, is they believe they are controlling the response and the experience of the end user because they brought everything in-house and they have, quote-unquote, trained their people to give certain responses. When we poll the end user base, especially when we're doing a takeover or we're bringing people into our service desk, we find that that's not the case. Many times, it's half the population hasn't been satisfied all along. And this is the part that's pretty alarming and why we wanted to do, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this webinar today. Very important, the next point, consistent, repeatable, a guaranteed experience for each request, regardless of the size of the firm, is extremely important. This goes back to the knowledge base. This goes back to the training. This goes back to best practices. This goes back to people seeing the same type of response in different environments. It's scalable. Growth doesn't affect the quality. You may have a hiring spree. You may bring on 20, 30, 40 people. You may do an acquisition and bring a whole new firm in, and then all of a sudden it buries your service desk. It doesn't need to be that way. Scale should not affect the quality of service that you provide your end users, because at the end of the day, that's not acceptable to them. It needs to be rapid. People, when they have an issue, they need to get back to work. You want them to get back to work. Your CEO wants them to get back to work. Time is money. Your responses have to be rapid, and they have to be right the first time. And that goes back to my house on fire example. Working with the right tools for the job, a lot of times people buy the tools because it's in their budget. It doesn't necessarily answer all the questions they wanted to ask. It doesn't need to be that way. Why can you not have all of the answers to everything you need through multiple tools? Well, the best way to do that, obviously, is you either get the budget to buy them all and then train all your people on all the tools, or you use a third party that has the expertise and has the access to these tools. And then encourage a career path for IT professionals. This is probably the toughest part or the toughest point against insourcing. A lot of times when you have folks on your staff, they really kind of know that that's what they're going to end up being. It's very difficult for them to move through the ranks. When you're utilizing an outsourced provider, it's for us to worry about. Encouraging a career path for your IT professionals is something that is very important. It's what keeps them in the game and keeps them motivated. So there's three options. I talked about earlier the three options of how to deliver IT support to your end users. We talked about insourced, outsourced, and partner. And I just want to spend 2 seconds to discuss what this means, at least what this means in my definition, so that we can move forward on the same page. An insourced service desk I'm looking at as a completely in-house, 100% full-time staff, full-time supervision, the skill set that you chose to put on that team, and the coverage hours that you need to provide generally is 24/7. That is all on you. It's the creation of your own processes. It's the creation of your own documentation. 9 times out of 10, the documentation is ad hoc because a lot of times there's not time to put it down. And then finally, you acquire and you operate all of the tools that your team utilizes. There's certainly a fair amount of control here. It makes some people that like control, makes them feel good, makes them feel non-threatened. But at the end of the day, there's quite a bit of risk with this. There's risk that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. The outsourced version, if you could go back for me for 1 second. The outsourced version is subscription to a fully managed professional services desk solution. This is the right-sized staffing. This is the availability to staff as you see fit with remote and on-site people, essentially creating, as one CIO that I've done business with says, you are my virtual IT team. It's the ability to take advantage of field-tested processes and tools. Not only that, but the skill sets. It's, having people at your disposal that have dealt with 99% of the issues that could even possibly come up in your environment. Instead of guessing, instead of knowing, you're relying on somebody that you can pretty well bet is battle tested. And then finally the partnered model, which is really sort of the best of each of the top two models. This is the ability to augment your existing full-time staff with all the best tools and resources from a service provider. Essentially provides you unlimited scale, unlimited skill sets, but also maintains comfort with your existing IT team and gives you the ability to fill in gaps where you might have enhancements necessary for process, for tools, and quite honestly for coverage hours, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So in the next couple of slides, what we're going to talk about is what each of those look like and what are some of the drivers that are answered by certain components of those models. And these are the four drivers that we see happening or that we see at least represented to us the most. Control, governance, skill set, and cost model. Each of these pieces is important in their own quadrant, but when mixed together, it can be a pretty significant decision matrix for any CIO or CTO. So as we go into the next couple of slides, we're going to focus on this just a bit. So here in the in-source model, I'm going to go through these a little quickly because I want to get to really some of the meat of the presentation. But in the in-source model, the control would be you protect your IP. Everything's internal. You essentially control the quality of the response that your end users get. And you control the BCP considerations. You're not relying on any third-party provider. Your skill sets, you're probably going to have some gaps because you can't possibly staff up and train for everything in your environment. We see this, quite a bit. You might have 90% of it covered, but every once in a while you're going to reach out to a manufacturer to help you out. You're going to have lack of scale. You basically have what you have at your disposal. And, one of the things that can happen long-term is stale staff. We talked earlier, just a few minutes ago, about giving people the opportunity for advancement, giving them the opportunity for growth. Well, if you don't have that, that staff is going to become stale. And what I see happening many times is firms are so busy because IT teams are so constrained that they stop going to get training. And it's really up to the individual to do the training on his own time or his own, do some reading on his own time. And that's just not really driving us to a world-class response. The cost model, obviously it's fixed cost. You basically know what it is. You're going to be responsible for turnover. You're going to be responsible for retention costs, and those can be stressful. And then obviously you're going to be responsible for the real estate where these people need to work and live. On the right-hand side of the slide, we sort of broke out a little bit about what does that mean? What does fixed cost mean? It goes beyond just the salaries, and what you'll see here is obviously your time to supervise, the benefits package that they'll receive, the technology that they need to work. I talked about the real estate, the training, which many times gets sort of put on hold, and then the BCP provisions. What are you going to equip them with so that when a Sandy happens again, they're functional for your end user base. And then finally, governance, the tools, the SLAs. Now internally, you probably don't have to worry about SLAs too much. It probably comes up at your year-end review. But at the end of the day, you still have tools to worry about. And again, to the right on the bottom, we talked about what does that mean? What do tools really mean? What's the CapEx associated with that? Well, you obviously are going to have some sort of ticketing system if you want to have any kind of order at all. You need to have a contact center telephony system so that you know who's calling you. You need to know if it's a VIP. You have a reporting portal, and disaster recovery solutions as you see fit. So that's in-sourced in a nutshell. Generally across the board. Yours may look a little bit different. We fully understand that, but in general, that's what it looks like. What you see here is outsourced. And again, this is what we see generally in the marketplace. This is a little bit of what we look like. It's a little bit what our competitors look like. But this is where control becomes third-party risk. It becomes management versus owning it. Certainly it's harder to customize unless you use a vendor like us that allows you to do some customization. Your skill sets are virtually unlimited. You have depth of bench, you have depth of skill set, and you have the ability to scale at the drop of a hat. Your cost model is variable, and again on the right-hand side we broke that out. What does that mean? A lot of times it's driven by your call volume, it's driven by the coverage hours that you want to have coverage, it's driven by the skill sets that you need, and it's certainly driven by SLAs. And the difference there is if you want a 2-hour SLA, meaning you want somebody on site resolving your issue in 2 hours, it'll cost you X. If you want somebody on site next business day, it's probably more competitive from a pricing standpoint. And then governance. A lot of vendors are SLA governed, meaning my performance, getting it to you inside of a certain parameter of time, allows me to bill you X. If I fail to meet that, then you have some recovery there. What you'll find, we'll talk about later on, is it's important as an outsourced provider to actually SLA govern ourselves, and we think that we're one of the few firms that actually does this, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And then a professional tool set. As I said before, when it's on you and it's on your budget, you basically buy what you can afford, and you deal with the gaps in coverage and tool set. By using an outsourced provider, theoretically, you should be able to fill all of those skill sets by buying all of the best-of-breed tools and getting them with the appropriate scale and the reduced cost by utilizing that. And then finally, the partnered model. What does control drive in the partnered model? Well, you now have limited exposure. You still maintain control, but your exposure is a little bit limited, and you're now sort of managing and coordinating a third-party vendor to help drive your solution to your end users. Your IP is shared, which will certainly require some ongoing coordination, some constant coordination going forward. The quote I made earlier from a CIO that I've worked with said, "You're my virtual IT team." This is essentially what we're doing with him. He has an internal staff, but he's basically relying on us for a lot of level 1, level 2, and some level 3, and therefore he's sharing his IP with us, and there's a lot of coordination. There are weekly account management meetings with this client, and it works beautifully. On the skill set, you still get unlimited ability to expand your bench and to bring any skill set in the house that you see fit, because you're working with a third-party provider. So we mix and match of the skill sets, what they have, what they may be missing. We bring that to the table for them. The cost model is an excellent efficiency. It's a mix of fixed and variable costs. The client knows his fixed costs. Our portion is variable. It allows him to realize good cost savings. It eliminates his exposure to turnover. It eliminates his exposure to retention costs. And on the right-hand side, again, you can see partner cost impact. Some of the things that we are talking about when we look at this, it's the staffing and the fixed costs are reduced to bare minimums. Extension needs to be covered by variable costs. That's our ability to fill in the skill set gaps, and it takes advantage of the best points of both the in-source and outsource model. Under governance, nothing really changes here from the outsource model. It's still SLA governed, and you still get all the best tools across the board. In fact, what I would say here is in the partnered model, a lot of times the firms that we work with don't have to buy any tools. They leverage us sometimes strictly for the tools. So at this point, what I'd like to do, because there's a really good high-level conversation that goes around how we do this, how we implement this across the board for some of our clients. I want to introduce Brandon Trevan. He's the managing director of the managed services side of our house. He's a guy that I've worked with for many, many years, excellent in the space, and really is a peer to many CIOs and CTOs that I work with today.
Thanks. Well, yeah, hi everybody. I appreciate that introduction. I'm going to talk for a few minutes now about what Align does to provide our client base with a world-class service desk solution that's really, governed by ITIL best practices and compliance, and attempts to mimic the IT service desks and the IT service delivery methods of the Fortune 500, the best of the best at providing this, and make it easily consumable in smaller bits by the mid-size enterprise. The way we break it down from a service desk perspective is really a two-tier offering, combining our remote service desk, our centralized remote service desk, and our on-site offering, where we provide skill set at your physical locations. We combine the two for a comprehensive offering. So first, I'll talk about the remote component of our service desk solution. We have a centralized team of desktop support specialists. These are folks that are career end-user support IT professionals. They not only possess the technical skill set required to deal with the idiosyncrasies of the desktop components, Windows 7, iOS devices, Android tablets, BlackBerries, work from home, BYOD, all that stuff. But they also have the soft skills required to interface with end users. And we see that as a very different part of IT service from the other part of IT service that the line also provides, which is, in our NOC and our System Administration Operations team, which you can find out more about on our website. Our central service desk is broken into 2 tiers. We have a level 1 desk and a level 2 desk. The level 1 desk are the folks that handle 80% of your issues, which tend to be basically the 20 most common issues that come in from a call perspective. So what we mean when we say level 1 really is are issues that can be resolved generally quickly, let's say under 15 minutes or so on average, repeatable process, and something that the steps to resolve the issue can be well documented. So there's an easily documented process that can be followed, and it's quick and it's repetitive. The level 2 team, these are a group of specialists with a higher level of skill set, many more years experience behind their belt. They handle issues that tend to be bespoke issues, issues you can't prepare for. There's no set procedure to resolve. It requires critical thinking, and it requires gray hair in the industry to understand what the issue is quickly, to problem solve, and to get to a solution. Both of these teams sit, right near each other in the same room. They collaborate face to face, but our process also mandates an escalation to the level 2 team after a limited time frame, so that the end user doesn't have to request that escalation, so that there isn't frustration before a higher skilled staff member gets involved. We enforce that severely at Align. We also have a VIP level service, which is a way for named individuals at our clients' firms, maybe a head of a trading desk or a COO or a CFO CEO or head of sales, someone who really needs immediate access to someone they feel comfortable with, to bypass level 1 and to contact our level 2 desk directly. And we see that as a differentiator. It's useful to note that this is a New York and New Jersey based team. We never outsource any bit of this responsibility. We never rely on any offshore resources. Align was built on a foundation of a quarter century serving financial services firms, and we believe that the quality we need to bring to the table, whether it's desktop support or high-end virtualization projects on the server side, is paramount to our reputation and the way we do business. All of these teams are full-time Align employees based in the Northeast, and while that can be costly, and you'll see most service providers don't take that approach, they look for a region where IT skill set is less expensive. We were able to take our scale and our experience and our tool set and bring those excellent resources into play at a very competitive cost point. I think you'll find that it's on par with anything you'd see from a competitor. The key point with a remote service desk is how effective can they be given that they're not on site and face-to-face with their end users. We've outfitted our remote service desk with the most sophisticated remote control tool set. We have the ability, without compromising your network's security in any way, to work collaboratively with your end user. So we've got some technology that allows us to take over the PC desktops and actually to share the screens of iPhones and BlackBerries, believe it or not, live with the end user, but only outbound from your network. So we never have to open a firewall port. We never have the ability to poke a hole in your network. We don't have to leave you exposed in any way. You invite us in each and every time, and you know exactly which agent you're permitting in, and it's totally under your control. We also have the same type of technology that allows our service desk to access your back-end systems. Obviously, you need a service desk that can reset a password in the critical application servers that you're connecting your end users to. We do not, as opposed to some of our competitors, we do not maintain any sort of hooks permanently into your network. We've got a jump box technology, which I can go into detail with for anyone who'd like to follow up with me afterwards, that ensures your security and gives us the access that you decide we should have. Another critical piece of technology in running a service desk is a contact center system. This is a call flow and dispatching system with an IVR and intelligent call routing. What it allows us to do is understand which engineers on our service desk are occupied, helping clients, and which are present and ready to take the next call, and those calls ring through to the next available agent. There's also the ability for us to pop up an intelligent screen knowing what client's calling, and a script where we can answer as you. We say, hello, welcome to client X, fill in the blank, help desk, how may I help you? So that it's branded as your service and allows us also to maintain a business continuity plan which is not physically based. Our phone system, our software-based phone system, is hosted in the cloud. It's redundant on the East and West Coast. It's connected to the biggest telephony carriers in the country, and we're able to continue servicing our clients and answering those phone calls arguably through the time that they need it most during a crisis, whether it's a crisis that takes up the whole East Coast of the U.S. or it's a crisis that's localized to one client's environment. We're able to continue operating as long as we've got internet connectivity, and we've got a plan to maintain interconnectivity from many, many locations and treat that whole team as one with that call dispatching system. And then last but not least is our ticketing and workflow system. Align has made a gigantic investment in ServiceNow. ServiceNow, many of you may recognize as the absolute leader, the fastest growing ticketing and workflow system on the market today. They recently went public. They are revolutionizing the industry of IT service delivery, and they allow us to meet ITIL governance practices with programmatic guarantees, and provide our clients with a dashboard and a ticketing and a workflow system that we extend out to them, that the cost barrier to entry would have been prohibitive. And for us, it's just the tool we use. And for our clients, they get the benefit of joining and jumping on board and using that same tool set, and we'll customize it for them. Some things that we handle in ServiceNow are our incident and request management system. We keep an AD sync of all our client contact info. That allows us to know exactly who we're talking to, how to get back to them, give them their own user portal of what issues they've got open with us at any point in time, and adhere to SLA timers. It also automates all the alerting and notification, and keeps us honest with metric reporting and a great dashboard for our client CIOs. So I'm going to talk next about our on-site solution. And pretty much everything I talked about remotely is available with our on-site sourcing solution. We have a few different models here. We believe 95% of end-user issues can be solved using the resources on our remote and central desk. That's because it's direct to tech. They're qualified engineers. They've got great tools. They've got great skill set. But there's always the need for some face-to-face and physical support, whether it's a peripheral that needs replacement, a printer or a monitor, a laptop that needs to be deployed for an end user, a patch cord that needs to be run in a wiring closet. There is inevitably a physical aspect to technology, and we recognize that. And many IT service providers, that's a more fair statement, but many IT service providers don't have that component. We accomplish it in a couple of different ways. We have a full-time on-site sourcing model where we can place full-time service desk engineers supervised by Align, trained by Align, using Align's ticketing system and using Align's call presence telephony system, but on your site, in your four walls. We can do that with one engineer up to 20, and in some cases we've built entire outsourced service desks inside our customer's facility with an Align supervisor on site. So anywhere from 1 to X. Okay. The next model is a part-time scheduled dispatch. So think of it as such. You rely mostly on our remote central service desk. Your users are still dialing the same 4-digit extension that forwards over to our 800 number. But Mondays and Thursdays for 4 hours a day, there's an on-site technician. It's the same face you tend to see each and every week. And anything that needs to be done physically gets added to that person's work queue, and they take care of it on those 2 occasions. There are some of our customers where the sensitivity of their IT need permits that kind of schedule. It's very cost effective. And then we have other clients, specifically in the financial services industry, but there are other sensitive industries as well, where the culture or the business need is more sensitive, and waiting for that scheduled arrival is not adequate. And for that, we have an on-demand dispatch service. We can get a skilled technician out to our client sites in any town or city in North America, typically within 4 hours. So when you're speaking to our remote service desk and it becomes apparent that there's a physical need, I can only go so far until someone goes there and traces that cable or replaces that monitor for me, we can dispatch. And in those dispatching scenarios, you're paying for that resource on an as-needed basis. The majority of the time you don't need it, and when you do, it's there for you under a tightly governed SLA. Next, please. All right, so we talked basically about our remote service desk and our on-site solution, and in those capacities, we can be a full-service outsourcer, where you can get to the business of your business and not worry about your service desk needs at all. We'll have a single point of contact at your firm, someone who's generally the CIO or the vendor manager, someone responsible for working with us and communicating your company's needs to us on a regular basis and consuming the reports and the metrics we give you. But there's another model that Mark mentioned earlier, which is the partner model. Align focuses not on the SMB space, although we do have many SMB customers and we're very successful there. But if you look at our client list over the last 27 years or so, you'll see that we've worked with some of the biggest brand names in the world. And what that brings to the table at Align are basically 2 things: an understanding of very sophisticated delivery, but also an understanding that our clients have sophisticated IT teams, and sometimes those IT teams are specialized to their need. And the notion of a generic outsourcer doesn't meet 100% of their need. So everything we've built at Align is built first as an extension to what we expect our client has is a sophisticated internal IT team. How can we make it elastic and extend it for them and fill in the gaps that they've got? And then as we matured that over the years, we developed fully outsourced solutions, which are very cost effective. So here we're going to talk about the partner aspect. How do we extend your existing IT team? Specifically around Service Desk, there are 4 ways we do this. The first is overflow. Minimize your staff. You keep the bare minimum to meet the unique needs of your environment, to keep staff that have unique IP about your environment, and generally to meet your on-site needs. You know you've got enough call volume for at least 1 full-time equivalent. Why not take advantage of that from a cost perspective and from an internal institutional knowledge perspective and keep that one guy there? But you know what? When he's out helping a user and he's on vacation, or he takes a sick day, or he's out at training, or he goes to a trade show, where do those calls go? Do you have gaps? Do they go into a voicemail system? Are they waiting in his email box for 4 days before they get addressed as your users become frustrated? So we've got a terrific way to handle your overflow. We'll outfit your minimal IT staff with our tool set. We can extend our ticketing system, pre-baked and then customizable to your needs, our call center system, our soft phone system, down to your staff we'll understand their presence information. We've got some technology that lets us know when they're at their desk ready to receive the next issue and when they aren't, for whatever reason they aren't, and direct the next call that comes in or the next ticket that automatically comes into a queue back to our remote desk. And that creates a virtual elastic team for you that you pay as you go. You use it when you need it, and when you don't, you've shut the faucet on that subscription service, and you're back to your fixed cost. The next way you'll see highlighted here is nights and weekend, which is really just a flavor of overflow, right? If during business hours you've got tight resourcing availability, well, the notion carries that in the night and weekend period, your call volumes typically go down, but you want to ensure that your work from home team, that your professionals are going home and they're VPNing in and they're catching up on their emails, and we know how the world works today. They're using their iPhones and their tablets from the dinner table, and they need to be kept productive. But the call volumes might not justify you maintaining the two heads per shift 24/7 staffing that you would need to support them. So we can take that overflow in the same mechanism we described before, but in the nights and weekend period. Very effective. Many clients use us for this. It's a really low impact way to start enhancing the service you offer to your end users. The next model is level 1 by a line. This is kind of a flip around. This is the complete opposite. This is for clients who say, I want my on-site IT team to be working on bigger, more value-add issues. I want them working on some IT projects. I want them focusing on long-term strategy, and they can't because they're always busy with the distraction of IT support. And in those cases, we're able to augment your staff by taking all the level 1 calls. So we direct all of your help desk call volume to us first. And our remote service desk is going to take care of 80 or better % of all that call volume, freeing up your staff to do that value-add work that you've kept them on payroll to do. And then when the issue is unique to you or something that requires institutional knowledge or a face-to-face interaction, those are the times that will escalate it back to your team so that they're only dealing with issues where they're really, where their skill set and their tenure with you is really necessary. That's freeing them up, that's giving them some quality of life, and that's making them much more strategic. Also, it comes in at a far lower price point because we're only using the line's level 1 team. So as opposed to a complete outsource, that's a great way to cut the price way down and keep a minimal staff on your side. And then the last but not least service is escalate to a line. This is very much like an insourcing, a whole insourced service desk on your part, but with that one magic bit that's always missing provided for you. You've got enough people to meet your need, and they're in the right places, and you're happy generally with their process. They've got a good rapport with their end users, and they've got good attention to detail, and they try real hard. But they only work at your company. They have limited exposure to the technology that's advancing in the world, and they have generally no lifeline. When they can't solve a problem, they have to throw their hands up in the air and then wait in a 5-day ticket queue with Microsoft or VMware or Dell. And frankly, those companies, sad to say, don't always bring their best game to play when they try to come in and help you. They go through days of robotic exercises that your team already went through, and you get nowhere fast. What we provide at Align is an SME team, the highest level of certified experts in Microsoft and VMware technology, in Dell and HP hardware, in mobile device technology, and in telephony, to provide a lifeline and a peer network to your service desk team. So they've got somewhere that they can call to get immediate and urgent response. And and access to people who have exposure to the technology that's going on at 50 firms, not just your one firm. So it's a little bit out-of-the-box thinking. When we keep harping on tools and process, and frankly the title of this webinar is how to go from chaos to compliance, what does that mean? Well, when we say compliance, we're generally talking about ITIL. ITIL is a framework for service delivery, for IT service delivery. It is a collected intelligence from the IT industry as a whole that defines the correct ways to handle an incident through resolution for the good of the business, to handle a request for access or a new device or new type of technology through resolution for the good of the business, to make it auditable, to make it well governed, to make it reportable, and to make it repeatable in a consistent fashion. But it's just a guideline. So many companies spend years, months or years, to take control of their chaotic IT environment, and what they rely on is a project to try to get them closer to the ITIL framework. When we enter a firm as their partner, we bring with us all of that work. We get you 80% of the way there with all of the best practices ITIL governs, and then the last 20% of it is just really the unique, customized part that makes your company your company. So, so how do we do that? I mentioned ServiceNow. You'll see some screenshots here that show what our agents see in our ticketing portal. There's also an end user portal that your users see, which is a far simplified view. It's just the issues that they've submitted. And you see above some workflows. And I just want to point out in those workflows, we customize those in the onboarding process of each client. Instead of shoehorning you into the service provider's way of doing things, while it sounds daunting, we create a custom workflow for each client. We understand the needs of mid and large size enterprise clients. We've got to match you, or you're not going to be comfortable moving to an outsourcer. We're here to make things easier for you. So we customize those workflows, and then you'll see at the bottom of that workflow, you'll see in those red lines to that timeline basically. That's where we define SLAs and operational OLAs that we use to police the expected time to delivery, time to update, time to acknowledge, time to complete, time to resolve the tickets that you define. It's actually a lengthy process, and we're going to talk about it in a coming slide. We're very good at it, and that hand-holding is one of the ways that we take your existing ad hoc environment and bring some order to it. It's really, really useful. Workflows are terrific. What happens first? What happens second? Who gets notified? What happens when an issue is resolved? They're great, but there's one big piece missing there, and it's your institutional knowledge. Most companies don't have adequate documentation, and they might have great Visio diagrams about their network infrastructure, but when it comes to end user support, there's a lot of process and a lot of technology that just basically lives in the brains of the people who walk around and help your end users. And that institutional knowledge is always at risk of walking out the door. And I know that this makes a lot of CIOs nervous. We spend a lot of time talking to people out in this space, and this is the common complaint, right? I'm either worried about my resourcing or I'm worried about my knowledge leaving the door. When we come in to elevate a service desk practice and to make it more professional, we also focus on getting this documentation down. So here's an example on the screen of like the table of contents, if you will, of the knowledge base that we create. When we get into a client, we ask for all these things. We're fully expecting we're going to get 10% of it back. And then we bring in our project team, our onboarding project, and we solicit the information that's necessary so that we can behave as you when we're solving your problems. And we document all of those procedures, all of that technology information, all of that contact and escalation and cultural information into a knowledge base that kind of looks like a wiki, and it becomes living documentation. And you can continue contributing to it over time, and we will contribute to it over time. And every time a documentation or a process or a step or a procedure is enhanced, the very next time a support call comes in that relates to that issue, the next technician to work on that issue gets to look at that knowledge base pop up and see the very, very latest piece of intelligence about it. And that's fully portable and fully exportable. And whether you use Align forever, which we of course hope you do, or you at one point or another choose to try it on your own again, you'll have that knowledge base available to you. And sometimes that alone is worth the partner effort. So I've mentioned the onboarding process. It is a project. It's a project that requires skill and attention to detail, and it's a project that we feel judged by and need to see through to success. So, Align's professional services team is probably the world's best IT project firm, and we've got all the references to prove that. The thing that gets in the way of enterprises choosing to outsource day-to-day operations is this fear that they're just going to hand themselves over to a new 800 number and a pool of people that don't know anything about them, and it's not going to work. Well, of course it's not going to work if that's the case. The way to go about this is it's team building, right? We're going to bring in a team of people who are going to manage this expansion project, because that's what it is, from beginning to end. We do this 4 phases. We scope out, we talk to you, we gather your requirements, we document your workflows, we figure out what it takes for Align to behave as an extension of your team. Phase 2 is to go and code those pieces of information into our web-based tools in our system and train our staff. Then we get you to sign off on the portals and the workflows and the knowledge base articles. And then we go into a transition phase for a couple of weeks where we keep the project team involved so that the adjustments and the modifications that need to be made right away to keep us successful and to have the best first impact to your end users are taken care of. And then we go into phase 4, which is steady state. It's business as usual. We've taken over operations in the capacity we were expected to, and we're continuously improving. So we've got some feedback mechanisms that are truly critical to constant growth and success that kind of lead us never really to shut the onboarding process down, but we understand that the importance of steady state. So that's kind of how Align does it. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Mark, who can help you take those next steps.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. So I want to get to some questions, because I do see that there's a bunch of questions in the queue. So let me go through this very quickly. What's next? And it's really pretty straightforward. First thing I would want you to do is, going all the way back to the beginning of this presentation, is you need to determine what perception you want to project to your end user base. And what I want you to remember is that example I gave you about the house fire. Are you sending a paramedic, and then are you sending somebody with a fire extinguisher, and then only then are you sending the fire truck? It doesn't need to be that way. You really need to think about the experience that the end users are getting. And a lot of times what we find when we go in to question the population, the end user population, is the answers that we get from them are different than the answers that you get from them. I don't know if that's management fear. I don't know what that is. Every culture is different. Every firm is different. But we get different responses than you get. Let us help you. Let's take the opportunity to look at it together. Prepare for the future. I think we would all agree that technology changes every single day. In order to stay on top of the constant evolution of technology, why not stay lockstep with it and take advantage of a provider like us that is dealing with this on a day in and day out basis. And then finally, the most important thing, take the first step. The only bad idea is an idea that we don't discuss. It doesn't cost you anything to discuss it. We are a resource for you. I would encourage people to talk to us a couple times a year, or at least once a year, just to understand what options are available to you, especially, let's talk about right now in Q4. What's dominating your calendar right now? It's probably budgeting for next year. How great would it be to already have an answer of what you think you're going to do going forward? So, listen, I'm happy to talk to anybody. We want to get to a couple of questions. I first want to thank everybody for their time in case anybody drops off. And we definitely look forward to talking with you again in the future. So I'm going to turn it back over to Megan for some questions. And again, thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Mark. Brendan, Mark, great job today. I think it's been a really great and thorough discussion. Just to reiterate, we will answer all of the questions that have been submitted today. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will certainly follow up via email. So let's see what question we have up first. Mark, this is for you. How long would it take for my firm to transition into your service desk?
Okay, good question, and that means that somebody was paying attention to Brandon. There's really a couple different answers to this because it depends if you're coming from an existing provider or if you're coming from an internal solution and what flavor of service desk you want us to try to perform. Are we coming in to fully augment? Are we coming in to partner with you? But at the end of the day, Brandon did show you a workflow. We do treat this like a project. It absolutely is an IT project. So it's going to take a few weeks. We're going to want to sit down and really go through with you what you want to have happen for any numerous number of incidents and responses and time of day. Is it a weekend? Is it a holiday? Who's on vacation? Those sorts of things. We're going to go through everything possible with you because we want to take the human element out of it, especially in a crisis. So it's a great question, and I would say a few weeks, but we have done some very, very, very quickly in crisis mode. So we are certainly equipped to do that too.
Great. Next question, I think, Brandon, if you could answer this one. If I have a remote office, how would you dispatch people outside of New York, New Jersey area, and would there be consistency in personnel?
Good question. So we take dispatch requirements through and requests through our remote service desk. So basically you call in to our central service desk, and if the need becomes apparent for a remote dispatch, they take care of that dispatching. They have access to a network of professionals that Align has vetted out in every major market in North America. That includes Canada and even Mexico. And these are Align vetted technicians that are that understand exactly what process to follow, and they're guided when they get on site by Align's central resources. So Align owns that issue through resolution, and the people that go on site for us are people that are there being directed by us step by step.
Great. Quickly, one last question. This is up for both of you. So do I have to use your ServiceNow tool, or could I use my own? Quickly, last 2 minutes.
Absolutely, you can use your own. We do have some clients that have their own ticketing and workflow systems. We'll plug a specialty team at Align into that system. The pro and con, nothing in life comes free. There's always a give up, and the give up is basically the depth of bench. So when you choose to use your own system, we're going to have to dedicate X number of aligners to be in the pool of folks that have access to that system and have training in that system. And if you choose to use Align's tool set, you get a much deeper pool of rollover resources.
I can't thank everyone enough for joining us today for this discussion, especially to Mark and Brandon. I think they really did a great job leading this discussion today. Please be sure to follow up with them if you have any more questions that haven't been addressed. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you all join us for our next webinar.